Hello and welcome to Access Asia. I'm Yuka Royer. Coming up in this show, a stunning fall from grace. Australia's most decorated soldier has lost a defamation lawsuit as a court found allegations that he had committed war crimes to be true. Not funny. A Chinese comedian has been handed a hefty fine for making a joke about the military amid growing censorship in the country's creative sphere. As South Korea grapples with widespread school bullying, a growing number of victims are striking back, sometimes years later, by publicly naming and shaming their abusers on social media. It's a case that's rocked Australia for months. Ben Robert Smith, a highly decorated military veteran, has lost his defamation lawsuit against two national newspapers that accused him of being a war criminal. A judge in Sydney rejected his claim, saying that the majority of the accusations published by the journals, including murdering unarmed prisoners, were substantially true. It's unclear whether the outcome of the civil trial will lead to a criminal prosecution. Brian Quinn reports.
A day of reckoning for Australia's most highly decorated living war veteran. A court in Sydney has found that three newspapers did not defame former elite Special Air Services soldier Ben Robert Smith when they reported his involvement in the murders of 6 unarmed prisoners in Afghanistan from 2009 to 2012. A vindication for the journalists who reported the story.
Today is a day of justice. It's a day of justice for those brave men of the SAS who stood up and told the truth about who Ben Robert Smith is. A war criminal, a bully and a liar. Today is a day of some small justice for the Afghan victims of Ben Robert Smith.
Robert Smith was awarded the country's top military honor, the Victoria Cross, in 2011 for gallantry on the Afghan battlefield. But in 2018, the Sydney Morning Herald, the Canberra Times and The Age published reports accusing him of war crimes, including kicking a handcuffed farmer off a cliff and shooting him dead, shooting a prisoner in the back before taking his prosthetic leg for a drinking vessel, and ordering at least 2 other murders. Robert Smith denied any wrongdoing and sued for millions in damages. The 110-day trial is estimated to have cost the equivalent of some 15 million euros.
Publishing a story of this magnitude is never easy, but high-quality investigative journalism is vital to a thriving democracy.
Robert Smith has yet to face criminal charges over the alleged killings. But more legal action is expected as Australia reckons with its role in the Afghan war. A 2020 military investigation found that special forces had unlawfully killed some 39 prisoners and civilians.
In a move that adds to already high tensions between the United States and China, Washington has signed a trade deal with Taiwan aimed at deepening bilateral economic relations. The new pact drew an angry response from Beijing even before it was inked. Emerald Maxwell has the details.
It's a deal intended to strengthen and deepen the economic and trade relationship between the United States and Taiwan that has infuriated China. Beijing considers the self-governing island of Taiwan part of its territory and has warned against any action that appears to treat it otherwise.
The United States must stop all forms of official interaction with Taiwan, must not negotiate or sign agreements with sovereign implication or official nature with Taiwan, or send the wrong signals to Taiwan's separatist forces in the name of trade.
Described by Taiwan's government as the most comprehensive trade agreement signed with Washington since 1979, the pact aims to streamline customs checks, improve regulatory procedures, and establish anti-corruption measures. The deal also opens up Taiwan to more American exports. The US is already Taiwan's second largest trade partner. Last year, the total value of their trade in goods amounted to $136 billion. Washington has also remained a key ally and arms supplier to the island, despite switching diplomatic recognition from Taipei to Beijing in 1979. Proponents of the deal say it will increase Taiwan's ability to resist economic coercion from China, which has in recent years ramped up pressure on the island, including via military drills in the seas around it.
In China, stand-up comedy has become the latest cultural sector to be swept up in a wave of government censorship. Last month, a popular comedian was placed under investigation and was slapped with a fine of nearly €2 million over a joke he made on stage. At the show in Beijing, Li Haoxi, who performs under the stage name House, appeared to poke fun at the People's Liberation Army. In recent weeks, a slew of cultural events have also been cancelled in China, sometimes with no reason given, as the Chinese government ramps up its rhetoric about national security and purported malign foreign influence. France 24's former Hong Kong correspondent Oliver Farry joins me for more. Hi, Oliver. Well, now, Oliver, what exactly prompted the authorities to crack down on stand-up comedy?
Well, the joke by Li Haoxi was a fairly irreverent but quite innocuous one, where the comedian spoke about seeing stray dogs chase a squirrel, and he described them using a phrase that has become used a lot by Xi Jinping to exhort the People's Liberation Army over the last 10 years. That is, forge exemplary conduct, fight to win. It's a phrase that would be instantly recognisable at this stage to Chinese people. Like much in the Chinese Communist Party lexicon, it's pompous and ripe for parody. And there's a big section of Chinese society that likes to joke about authority, but it comes with great risks, especially if you're doing it in public. In this case, poking fun at the army was out of bounds. It poked an outcry in nationalistic circles on Chinese social media, such as Weibo, and it was probably this that preceded the official crackdown. Chinese authorities don't always dictate societal trends. In some cases, they're reacting to what they see as public sentiment, and in this case, they probably felt that they had no choice but to crack down so as not to show weakness in effect. And the Chinese Communist Party, of course, is not known for its sense of humour.
And so what happens next for this comedian?
Well, Li Haoxi, who's one of the stars of China's burgeoning stand-up comedy scene, was forced to apologise and his social media accounts vanished. Another woman who defended him on Weibo was also arrested. Now, it's unclear exactly what will happen next, but it's unlikely that Li Haoxi will ever perform again as long as the Communist Party is in power. He could also face up to 3 years in prison. And as you said, other cultural events have been rather cryptically cancelled over the last couple of weeks.
Now, Oliver, the Chinese Communist Party has long kept a very close hold on arts and culture, going back to the earliest days of the People's Republic. So what's been changing under President Xi Jinping?
Well, Chinese writers and artists, including Communist Party members themselves, have a long history of falling foul of the party, and writers in particular, if they want to be critical of the government, they more or less have to do it from exile, and their only option for getting published now, if any, is Taiwan. In popular culture, there's plenty of cinema and TV that actually shows a nuanced portrait of Chinese society, but this is very much shunted off to the margins, and in recent years, artists have been very careful not to criticise the powerful. China under Xi Jinping is becoming a more culturally homogeneous place, at least in terms of the culture that is allowed to be officially produced.
And what effect is all this having on China's cultural sector?
Well, the domestic sector itself is becoming a lot more cautious and a lot more probably single-minded in that sense. Foreigners who previously hoped to crack the Chinese market are now less hopeful, to the point of not really making accommodations to please the Chinese government. We saw this last year with the Hollywood movie Top Gun Maverick, where a Taiwan flag that was on Tom Cruise's character's jacket from the first film in 1987 was actually kept in the film, contrary to expectations. That more or less made sure the film would never be released in China. Last month, the British-Malaysian comedian Nigel Ng had his Chinese social media accounts banned after cracking jokes about Xi Jinping at a show in the United States. Now, Nigel Ng shot to fame in Asia a few years ago for his Uncle Roger character, which is a sort of a typical argumentative Chinese uncle who makes humorous comedy on cookery shows. Ng had previously been very careful not to offend China. In early 2021, he apologised on his Weibo channel for offending China after collaborating with the Chinese-American YouTuber Mike Chen. Now, Chen is a fierce critic of the Chinese Communist Party. 2 years on, Ng doesn't really seem to care anymore. He's actually using his new cancelled in China status, more or less, to sell his new online show. He probably senses the Chinese market, lucrative as it is, even for an English language comedian like himself, is probably out of reach to comedians in the current climate.
Oliver Farry, thank you for that update. In South Korea, a new kind of Me Too movement is taking hold on social media, that of people who suffered abuse at school. A growing number of victims have been publicly naming and shaming their former bullies. Inspired in part by a popular Netflix series, it ensnared everyone from K-pop stars to baseball players. Monty Francis has more.
The South Korean Netflix series The Glory centers on a former victim of school violence who takes revenge on her bullies years later, and the show has become an international hit. But it's doing more than racking up views across the globe. In South Korea, it's inspired a movement. Victims of bullying are taking to social media using the hashtag #HakpokMeToo, hakpok, the Korean word for school violence. Among them, this 26-year-old hairdresser who says she was relentlessly tortured in high school. As an adult, Pyo-yi Rim says she suffered from years of insomnia and depression as a result of her treatment at school.
분명히 지금 생각해도
Even now, I still wonder how I could have endured it all.
다 견뎠지라는 생각이 지금도 들어요.
In elementary school, kids put thumbtacks in my shoes and put my head down a toilet.
에다가 얼굴을 집어 넣으려고 하고.
School violence and bullying is widespread in South Korea, according to a lawyer who specializes in prosecuting such cases. She calls it a collective trauma the whole country needs to process.
Any South Korean who has gone to school in the past has been a victim at least once, or at least witnessed other students being bullied and not helped. We all have memories of this.
Consequences for the accused can be swift and serious. After Pyo decided to go public with her accusations, one of her alleged bullies was fired from their job. Public figures have also faced fallout. A set of twin volleyball players, then 24 years old, were cut from their team after admitting to verbally abusing their teammates in middle school. And a member of the girl group Le Seraphim was kicked out of the band after facing anonymous accusations of bullying. Critics say the results can be unfair and career-ending for the accused, who have no legal recourse to defend themselves. But Pyo and other victims are lobbying for suspending the statute of limitations so victims can bring charges against their bullies years after the abuse occurred.
That's it for this week's Access Asia. Remember, you can watch this and previous episodes of the show on our website, france24.com. For now, do stay tuned. There's more world news coming up.